Hello and welcome to the show. Today you're going to meet two powerful women who have spent most of their careers as organizers and advocates, particularly in the Black community. And sometimes it's about politics, sometimes it's about social issues, sometimes it's about policy, but it is always about marginalized people. You've heard the saying, empowered women empower women, and that is the best description of my first guest. Jotaka Eaddy. She is the founder of Win with Black Women, and she's one of the organizers behind that amazing Zoom call that started with a few hundred women and ended with more than 44,000 on a mission to do something. Welcome to the show, Jotaka. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Portia. It's great to be here with you. It was great to have you to be one of the 44,000.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. So listen, I want to talk about we've got to get the mechanics of that, the logistics of that, right? Because you have a call to have this conversation, but you guys have been having these calls on Sundays for years, right?
Yes.
But this one was different. How do you first, when you recognize that there are a lot of people who want to be on this call and in the conversation, how do you just get Zoom to make that happen?
Well, it takes a lot of coordination.
Quickly.
A lot of coordination, but also Black women. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a part of the story. As you shared, Win with Black Women, we had been meeting for 4 years. Since 2020, we had came together around our collective concern around the narrative of racism and sexism that had entered the debate as it related to who was going to be the next vice president of the United States. And since then, we had met around really 3 very important goals. 1, speaking out against racism and sexism, against Black women, whether it was in the political arena or entertainment,
workforce,
wherever.
Yeah.
2, working in our personal capacity, because the Black women leaders that join Win with Black Women all join in their personal capacity. Many of them have vibrant careers outside of what they do when they come to Win with Black Women.
Right.
But our goal is to elect Black women up and down the ballot, whether they are running for city council or president of the United States. And 3rd, elevating both the power and the positive image of Black women, and particularly that of Black women-led organizations. So we had been meeting. Mm-hmm. We had a meeting scheduled for that night, and we had been weighing in on the conversation as it related to this presidential cycle. So I think it's full circle that this 4 years from when we started, we found ourselves on this historic call on July 21st, but that night we thought we would have maybe 1,000.
Right.
And it was a regular Zoom meeting. And as you probably know, I worked in Silicon Valley, so the Zoom meeting is very different from a webinar. And so in real time, I think when I couldn't get in my own Zoom because it was over capacity, we knew something.
Oh, you couldn't even get
I couldn't get on my own Zoom, and I am the owner of the account, so it was at capacity. And so we tried to get people to hang up, and I said, well, maybe we need to switch it to a webinar. And our webinar capacity at the time was 3,000.
Okay.
Within 30 seconds of turning on the webinar and sending out that new link, it was at capacity. Mm-hmm. And while we were on the call, I think it was probably around, our call started at 8:30, so this was probably around 10 p.m., a gracious, beautiful Black woman on the call picked up the phone, called a friend at Zoom headquarters. Wow. And this is like 10 o'clock at night. Zoom engineers got in behind our system in real time, opened up our call, which then allowed for the 44,000 that got on the Zoom call. But if you could imagine, between 8:30 and 10, Black women across the country wanted to participate, so they figured out a way.
Found other ways and other avenues, right? But I want to talk about I think it is worth noting some of the changes that have come at Zoom and some of these other platforms just as a result of that call, just opening it up. Not politics, not policy, just business.
Yes. Yes, so Zoom recently announced that they now have the capability to have simultaneously 1 million people on a webinar, which, as someone who worked as an executive in Silicon Valley, that's quite for us to see not only the political and the social and cultural impact that Win with Black Women and Black women as a whole and Black women organizations and this movement has had on the culture and politics, but also now on business, because people are now talking about Zoom again. They're talking about the use of these platforms, and I think it's really
and being able to connect across the country in different ways, right? I think it's important too. I want to get to just sort of the bigger issue of what happened afterwards. That there were others who said, We want to have a call too. We want to have this conversation too, and really just how it spreads. And I think that's a good example of just how advocacy works when people learn how to speak up.
Yeah, I think it's been beautiful to see, because Black women, we've always led. I mean, you look at, and you talked about this at the top of the show, you talked about the lineage of Black women. When with Black women, we stand on the shoulders of Black women who came before us, Black women who poured into each generation, that ultimately poured into myself and the others that power win with Black women. And so to see in this moment, Black women taking our rightful place in leadership and others following suit. And so we saw Black men, and I think it's so important to say this, that the very next call, a lot of people talk about the white women, the white dudes, the Latino women, and the Asian, and all of those. But the very next call, the very next day, was more than 55,000 Black men. And this organization, Win with Black Men, and it's so important to show the solidarity of the Black community in this moment, particularly when there's a lot of conversation about us being divided. I think we're more united than we've ever been, which is now we've seen white women, white dudes, disabled
and there's
communities.
The domino effect.
It's a domino. Even cats and dogs united for.
That's right. The cat owners too. Always get the cat owners in.
There's a lot.
Listen, I want to talk though too, because it goes beyond the political advocacy. I mean, you all were really in the forefront of just sort of ringing the bell for Brittany Griner when she was still being incarcerated on the other side of the globe. Let's talk about what that kind of advocacy looks like when you say we want to make sure we are bringing attention to something that people aren't talking about in mainstream media or even at the kitchen tables.
Yeah, so when with Black women.
How and why?
Yeah, well, the why is because it is important. If not us, then who? And if not now, then when? And so when with Black women, we always elevate those that are within our network. So the president of the WNBA Players Association, Terry Jackson, was a part of Win with Black Women. So she was someone in her personal capacity leveraging for the work that we were doing early on. And quite interestingly, Brittany Griner herself had signed on to some of our previous open letters. And it was Angela Rye and Don Staley, Coach Don Staley, who were part of Win with Black Women, who said, we have to pay attention to what's happening to Brittany Griner. And we worked in partnership with Brittany's team, her publicist, and her wife, Sherelle, and the WNBA Players Association to lend advocacy. So we wrote an open letter. We sent that to the president. Brittany herself had a powerful letter. So we will never take credit for just ourselves, but we were a part of putting that
in the public
there.
Square where people were not talking about it beforehand. And then we see, obviously, she is home and picked up her own line of advocacy she left off. Before we go to break, though, I just want to make the point, and something I've heard you say, that this doesn't always have to start with a bunch of people with a bunch of power and lofty positions and a lot of money in their pockets, right?
Yeah.
It just starts with a desire to want to speak on behalf of a cause or people or an issue in your own backyard.
Yeah, I think the part that's most important is that everyone has a position to play, and we all carry influence, and particularly Black women. We yield power, whether it's in culture, whether it's in business, wherever it is, and all it takes is just a desire to just act. Whether or not that action is in your own house, at your own kitchen table, or in your own community, we all have the power to do something. And when we come together, and I think that's the real power, when we come together, whether we're coming together in our community or on a national scale, there's nothing that can stop the power of Black women. And I think we're seeing that right now in this country. Indeed,
we are. All right, we're going to pause right there, because when we return, we're going to meet Dr. Rosalind Satchel. She is on a mission to galvanize marginalized citizens throughout her work with the New Georgia Project. And she's going to join the conversation with some advice for strategic advocacy. That's coming up right after the break. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I really want to thank you for season 3 of Portia. It's because of loyal viewers like you that we keep getting to share this daily dose of positivity all across the country. So just a reminder, I still need you to like, comment, and subscribe. And go ahead and tell your friends. You can catch us now in Orlando, in San Francisco, in Atlanta, and all across the country on Fox Soul. Tell your friends. We'll see you soon on Portia.